After being diagnosed with cancer, I didn't know how to break the news to my family. The medical report had been sitting on the table for 3 days, untouched. No one asked me a thing. It wasn't until the 4th day, when I missed making dinner because of a follow-up appointment at the hospital, that the phone finally started ringing off the hook. It was 5:30 by the time I walked out of the doctor's office, right into the evening rush hour. With one hand clutching my medical file and a small bag of prescriptions, and the other carrying groceries, I struggled to squeeze onto a packed city bus. That's when my phone started buzzing like crazy. A kind young woman offered to hold my grocery bag for a moment, giving me just enough room to dig into my coat pocket and answer the call. Leona's sharp voice blasted through the receiver. "Clara, why haven't you picked up Zach from school yet? His teacher just called. He's the only kid left in the classroom and he's crying his eyes out." Panic surged in my chest. I quickly asked, "Did someone pick him up already?" "I told Daniel this morning he was supposed to get his son today. I had a doctor's appointment this afternoon." Before I could finish, she cut me off with an irritated snort. "Oh my God, Clara, what could possibly be more important than Zach? He's still at school. You need to get over there now." "I can't leave," she added in a huff. "I already made plans for dinner and shopping with my girlfriends. And Daniel? He's been in meetings all afternoon. He probably forgot as usual. This kind of trivial stuff isn't worth bothering him." I opened my mouth to say I wouldn't make it in time either and that James could probably go instead, but she'd already hung up. Right before the call dropped, I clearly heard her complaining to her friend. "Daniel's mom is so useless. She can't even handle a simple favor. Totally unreliable." I felt a sharp tightness in my chest. My hand hovered over the screen about to dial James. But then I froze. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. "Your body's already very weak. You'll need someone to accompany you during future treatments. And you must avoid stress and household chores as much as possible. So be it. If I'm no longer good enough to help, then maybe it's time everyone took care of their own responsibilities. After all, he's their child, not mine." I stood there on the bus, dazed as it rolled past 2 more stops without me even noticing. That's when my phone rang again. This time it was James. "Clara, have you been out wandering around all day? Do you even realize Zach's still at school waiting for someone to pick him up? I just got home and Leona called me in a panic. Said she tried calling you and couldn't reach you. Why haven't you gone to get him yet? The teacher's been waiting there this whole time. Can you imagine how upset Zach must be?" His voice kept coming through, full of reprimand. My chest tightened even more, but I stayed silent. When he finally stopped talking, I replied quietly but firmly, "That boy has a mother and a father. Maybe they should stop relying on an old woman to do everything." Maybe it was my tone, cool, distant, something he'd never heard from me before, that caught him off guard. He paused for a second, then snapped, "What kind of talk is that, Clara? Don't take this the wrong way, but Zach is our grandson. Is this really the kind of attitude a grandmother should have? Forget it, I'll go pick Zach up myself today. You just head home and get dinner started. The kids have been working hard all day. It's not right if they come home to an empty table." I wanted to tell him that I wasn't feeling well either. That my body, after all the hospital visits, was already running on fumes. But the words stopped in my throat. I'd trained myself not to complain, years of swallowing every ache, every exhaustion, every feeling, because what did it ever get me? At best, a dismissive "you're being dramatic." So for the first time I didn't respond. I ended the call before he could say another word. James has lived an easy life. Born into a well-educated family, he was the kind of man people used to describe as refined and distinguished, even in his youth. His career flowed smoothly from the start, and just this year he retired from his post as director of the local art museum. Decades immersed in the arts had given him a quiet, cultured elegance that still turned heads, even at 67. That, and the fact that he never had to bother with the messier parts of life. And honestly, he never had to. From childhood, his mother handled everything down to the smallest detail. After we got married, I picked up where she left off, seamlessly. He never had to worry about the house. He's never done a load of laundry, never even washed his own socks. James firmly believes that a gentleman stays out of the kitchen. Domestic chores, in his mind, only served to taint the purity of his artistic aura. Even after retirement, he stayed as busy as ever, thriving in the local community and senior centers. choir practice, Latin dance, violin lessons. His schedule is packed tighter than it ever was when he was working. Everyone calls him Professor James, the talented Renaissance man, admired and adored. His calendar is always full. Our children know better than to expect him to pitch in. No one ever asks him to help with pickups or babysitting. Then there's me. I studied painting too once. Back in college, we were both in the oil painting program. I had promise, my professors thought so too. But then I met James and I fell deep and hard. And after that, well, life slipped through my fingers. Years flew by in a blur of housework, tending to James, raising our son and then our grandson. Always rushing, always busy, yet nothing in it truly felt like mine. No point dwelling on it now. As the bus rolled past familiar streets, I realized we were nearing home. But for some reason my heart grew heavier with each passing block. Maybe it was just the early signs of the cancer, the fatigue, the dull ache in my bones. But all of a sudden I didn't feel like going home anymore. But the truth was, I had nowhere else to go. My parents were long gone and most of my old friends had their own families, their own busy lives. I stared blankly out the bus window and for the first time, a wave of deep sadness washed over me. 65 years of life and I had no one I could really talk to. Not one soul. About 15 minutes later my phone rang for the third time. Clara, why aren't you home making dinner yet? Zach's throwing a tantrum, says he's starving. Daniel's about to get home too and I don't cook, you know that. Are we supposed to just sit around and wait for you for another half hour? What's going on with you lately? The older you get, the more unreliable you become. Where are you and why aren't you taking care of the house? James's voice wasn't particularly loud, but in the noisy bus, I could still hear every word crystal clear. There was a time long ago when I'd been enchanted by his voice. Deep and steady, a voice that never failed to calm me even during arguments. But now every word felt like a slap. Turns out, even the most pleasant voice can be ugly when it's used to scold and belittle. The rose-colored lens I'd seen him through for decades shattered in an instant. I didn't even bother responding with emotion. You two combined are well over 100 years old. Can neither of you function on your own? What are you going to do if I drop dead tomorrow? Starve. He went silent, clearly stunned. Before he could come up with a response, I ended the call again. He didn't call back. James has always had his pride and his temper. He never asks for help and never backs down. And I just hung up on him twice in one day. That was more than his ego could take. But a few minutes later my son Daniel called. Apparently today my phone had become a hotline. Mom, what's going on with you lately? You didn't pick up Zach, you didn't cook, and now you're arguing with Dad. He's so upset he's lost his appetite. Come on, we're just trying to have a normal evening. You're not getting any younger either. What are you trying to prove? He barely got the words out before his sister Anna snatched the phone from him. Her voice was just as full of complaints. Seriously, Mom, you've been slacking off lately. It's already this late and dinner's not ready. I'm starving. We all came over for dinner and Olivia said she wants Grandma's spaghetti bolognese, her favorite. You better hurry back or she's going to throw a fit again. I said nothing. I remembered how when both of them were getting married and buying homes, they'd made sure to choose houses just a few blocks from ours. Said they couldn't stand being far from us. Since then, unless it was the weekend or a special occasion for dining out, they came here for dinner nearly every weekday. I treated both Zach and Olivia the same, picked them up from school, fed them, helped with homework. Most days I'd collect Olivia from preschool, then head straight to Zach's elementary school, pick up groceries on the way and rush home to cook for everyone. It had become our routine. One big lively dinner every evening. But since Olivia's other grandmother had come to visit, I hadn't needed to pick her up. Even so, I didn't know what to say now. Should I blame myself for caring too much over the years? Or should I blame myself for failing to raise my children right? Raising a house full of dependents who never learned how to stand on their own? After a long pause, I replied flatly, "You can eat without me tonight. I won't be coming home for dinner." After saying that, I turned off my phone. At last, the world went quiet. Somewhere along the way, the bus had already passed my stop. Darkness had settled over the city, unfamiliar streets unfolding outside the window. But for the first time tonight, I had a seat to myself. How ironic, really. I'd skipped making just one dinner and suddenly everyone came after me like I'd committed some terrible crime. And yet, the breast cancer diagnosis report had been sitting on the living room coffee table for 3 full days. Not a single person had asked me about it. They sit on that couch every day glued to their phones watching TV playing games. Even the fruit I carefully replace with fresh ones each day. They never ask, never notice, just reach out and help themselves. But somehow not one of them has glanced at the medical report right next to it. Was it just because my name was printed on the cover? Did that make it invisible to everyone by default? Like me, living in that house for decades, giving and giving yet never truly seen. My children always say, "Mom, you really lucked out marrying Dad. You never had to work and you got to be the elegant wife of an art museum director." Relatives gush about how James carried the whole family, provided everything, raised 2 accomplished children. What a remarkable man. The ache in my chest sharpened again, and without realizing it, tears had already started streaming down my face. I turned my head toward the window, hoping no one would see me cry. At my age, there's always that fear of looking pathetic to strangers. The city lights outside blurred in the veil of tears, flickering, distant, unreachable. So many homes lit up across the city, yet not one of those lights felt like it truly belonged to me. Just then, a pale hand reached into my vision, offering me a tissue. It was the same kind young woman from earlier. "Ma'am, are you okay? Here, take this." She smiled gently. "The breeze by the window's pretty strong. Be careful not to catch a cold. Oh, and I saw the bag of medicine you're holding. I figured maybe you weren't feeling well." I took the tissue and nodded, my voice catching as I whispered, "Thank you." But somehow, the more I wiped, the harder the tears fell, until it felt like everything inside me was finally pouring out. One simple act of kindness from a stranger. Something my own family hadn't shown me in years. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I made a quiet, unwavering decision. If love has to be begged for and a home has to be earned through sacrifice alone, then maybe it was never really mine to begin with. And if that's the case, then I'm done wanting it. When the bus reached its final stop, everyone else got off. I stood up, unsteady on my feet, swaying a little as I grabbed my bags. The young woman noticed and immediately stepped in again, taking most of the weight from my arms without hesitation. "Thank you so much," I said, genuinely moved. "You've really helped me today. You must be exhausted yourself. Commuting this far after work must be tough." She waved it off with a smile. "Not at all. I'm actually just an intern at the hospital where you had your appointment." Then she added almost sheepishly, "I got off several stops ago, but you looked like you weren't doing so well. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, so I stayed on with you. Do you live nearby?" I froze for a second, guilt washing over me. "Oh no. I don't live around here. I'm so sorry. Let me call a cab to take you home. Thank you for caring." "Really, I'm fine, I just feel terrible for troubling you." "You don't need to apologize," she said gently. "If anything, you should take a cab home. You're not feeling well. Don't push yourself. I can just catch a bus back from the other side of the street. It's easy." "No," I said firmly. "You've already done so much. This was my mess and I won't let you go back alone because of me." I insisted on walking her to the curb and hailed a cab, ushering her in with me. First, I had the driver take her home. Then I gave directions to head toward mine. I hadn't brought anything with me today. I was only supposed to go in for a routine checkup. Now I needed to head back and start packing my things. As she got out of the car, she turned back with one last warm smile. "Ma'am, you know, medicine has come a long way. Don't lose hope. Everything might turn out just fine." I waved goodbye and tears nearly slipped again. Somehow, all the heaviness, the bitterness of the day felt a little lighter, healed just a bit by the kindness of a stranger I hadn't even known an hour ago. Back near home, I passed by a restaurant just outside our neighborhood, one that had a reputation for being exclusive and overpriced. I'd heard James and the kids mention it more than a few times. They'd only been there for formal dinners or special occasions, always praising how refined it was. Yet not once did any of them think to take me there. Maybe they never saw me as someone who belonged in places like that. To them, I was just a housewife, someone who saved money, cooked meals, did laundry, not someone who needed to experience fine dining. Without thinking too much, I turned and walked in. For the first time in my life, I sat down alone and treated myself to a proper, elegant dinner. The groceries I'd bought earlier were already long gone, tossed into a trash can after I'd stepped off the bus. I used to worry about every dollar trying to save for my kids and grandkids. The fewer luxuries I indulged in, the more I could leave for them. Even calling a cab used to feel like a splurge I had to justify. But now that I'm sick, I realized if there's anything left I still want to do, I should do it. No one knows how many days I have left. So I tasted every bite of the meal they used to rave about, and quietly realized it wasn't all that special. I'm not some fool who can't tell good from bad. I'd just never been given the chance to choose for myself before. After dinner, I took a slow walk home, letting the meal settle in my stomach. By the time I reached the door, it was past 10. The moment I opened it, I was hit by a heavy mix of food smells and alcohol in the air. The house was a mess. Dinner had just ended, and the dining table looked like a battlefield. Plates everywhere, crumpled napkins, leftover bones from chicken wings scattered across the surface. The living room was no better. Like a small hurricane had swept through. Leona and Anna were slouched on the couch, chewing on fried chicken wings, eyes fixed on the television. Zach and Olivia sat nearby, mimicking the adults, each clutching a bag of snacks while glued to their tablets, fingers flying across the screens playing games. Out in the backyard, James and Daniel, along with Anna's husband, were drinking beer and chatting about retirement plans and stock market trends, as if there wasn't a single problem in the world worth worrying about. James had always had stomach issues, and it was usually me who kept a close eye on him, making sure he stayed away from alcohol. But tonight he was drinking freely. No doubt his stomach would keep him up later, aching in protest. I stepped through the door, changed into my house slippers, and stood there for a moment. No one even looked up. The first to notice me was Leona. She glanced my way briefly, her expression full of impatience, then turned back to the TV without a word. I walked straight across the room, quietly heading toward the master bedroom. But just as I rounded the corner into the hallway, I came face to face with someone I hadn't expected to see. She looked just as surprised. "Clara, you're finally back," she said, trying to sound warm. "I was just telling James he should call you. It's late and I was worried it wasn't safe for you to be out alone." I froze. Truth be told, Vivian's presence in my home wasn't new. Ever since she'd moved into one of the upscale condos nearby last year, she'd visited a few times, always as a polite guest. But now, seeing her walk out of my bedroom in a soft, silky loungewear set, tousled hair and sleepy eyes, something in me twisted. Vivian, James's old flame. His dream girl. Once the star of the East Coast Ballet Conservatory, the graceful goddess who had every young man's heart in the palm of her hand. Time, it seemed, had been particularly kind to her. She still carried herself with the same effortless elegance. Her beauty, refined by the years, hadn't dulled one bit. Back then, James had plenty of admirers, but it was only Vivian who ever truly caught his heart. They had been entangled for years. Never officially together, but never really apart. Then, just after graduation, she married a real estate tycoon 2 decades her senior and moved abroad. That was when I stepped in. With Vivian gone, I seized my moment. Bit by bit, I closed the gap until I finally became James's wife. Though he never offered grand romance, he did give me one clear condition. If we married, I'd have to give up my career completely and dedicate myself to supporting his artistic pursuits at home. And I did, faithfully, year after year. I held up my end of the bargain. I believed I'd earned my place. I believed that chapter with Vivian had been buried long ago. James never spoke of her again. We both pretended those years never happened. But when Vivian moved back and made her first visit, I remember how stiff and uncomfortable their reunion had been. The air between them practically crackled with unresolved history. Still, it didn't take long after that for James to rekindle the connection. And clearly, things had progressed more than I'd been told. Vivian's voice wasn't exactly subtle. It carried across the room, drawing every pair of eyes toward us. Daniel lit up when he saw me. "Mom, you're finally back. Where have you been this late? We tried calling you so many times and you didn't answer." Then he turned toward the couch and called out, "Good thing Anna thought fast and ordered Mexican takeout. We just finished eating. Now you can get started on cleaning the table, doing the dishes, and mopping up." My son-in-law chimed in with a teasing smile, waving his beer bottle. "Clara, how about whipping up a little something extra? Popcorn or a cheese platter, maybe? James is in such a good mood tonight, I think he's ready for another round." Before I could even open my mouth, Vivian jumped in, flustered and eager to explain. "Clara, please, don't be upset. I wasn't trying to overstep. I just felt a little dizzy earlier and it was too noisy outside. James suggested I lie down in your room for a while. The kids were all in the living room. I swear it's not what you think. James, hearing her, immediately set down his drink and rushed over. Vivian, are you feeling better now? He asked with concern, eyes locked on her face. Only after that did he turn to me, with a tone cold enough to frost glass. She's our guest, Clara. Do you have to act like this? Do you even remember where your own front door is? I was starting to think you got lost somewhere. Look at the time. This is completely unacceptable behavior. I raised my head and stared at him. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Oh. And what about a guest who ends up lying in the master bedroom in the middle of the night? What kind of behavior is that supposed to be? And you, James Blake, retired art museum director, champion of refinement and elegance. What exactly do you call leading a single woman into your wife's bed while she's not home? Is that your idea of grace? His face darkened instantly. You're deliberately stirring up drama. This is pure slander. Vivian flushed, clearly uncomfortable. She tugged lightly at his sleeve, whispering, James, stop. It's my fault. If I'd known Clara would be upset, I never would have used that room. But my chest was already burning, my breath shallow with fury. I didn't want to hear another word. I turned and walked toward the bedroom, not bothering to respond. The tension in the room was suddenly suffocating. No one said a word. Anna rushed after me and caught my arm, trying to stop me. Mom, what's gotten into you? Anna said, her tone edged with irritation. You're being really harsh. Vivian just wasn't feeling well. She caught a bit of a cold. Dad only invited her over for dinner so she wouldn't be alone while she's sick. She paused, then added with a note of reproach. And honestly, you were kind of in the wrong today. So what if Dad said a few words to you? Zach was stuck at school. Of course we were all worried. Families are supposed to look out for each other. Daniel nodded beside her, softening his tone a little as he stepped closer. Anna's right, Mom. You've been home all day. Maybe you don't realize how exhausting things are out there. We're constantly running in circles. Coming home and finding there's no dinner. It's just frustrating. Maybe we were a little harsh, but don't take it personally. I looked at these children, my children, and felt a cold emptiness settling deeper inside me. Not a word of concern, not a single question about where I'd been, if I'd eaten, if something had gone wrong. Just judgment, excuses, and expectations. Then Leona's eyes flicked to the pharmacy bag in my hand. Her mouth curled with a mocking smile as she chimed in, voice thick with sarcasm. Exactly, Clara. Zach was practically in tears from hunger earlier. He's still so young. What if something had happened because he skipped a meal? She glanced at the shopping bag and sneered. You sure seem to have a leisurely day. Stocking up on all those supplements again? I've told you 100 times. Those things are a scam. A complete waste of money. You'd be better off spending it on gifts for Zach and Olivia. At least they'd enjoy it. She let out a small laugh and added, if you're really so bored, maybe take a page from Vivian's book. At least she knows how to dress well and carry herself with taste. She actually looks like she belongs next to James. My face turned to stone. Daniel quickly tugged at Leona's sleeve, clearly sensing the tension thickening in the air. What the hell, Leona? You've had too much to drink. And for the record, my mom's always been frugal. She hardly ever spends money on herself. He turned to me, trying to soften the blow. Mom, it's late. The dishes can wait till morning. Why don't you help the kids get ready for bed? Olivia said she wants to sleep over tonight. I slowly turned my gaze toward each of them. These faces I knew so well, and felt only a cold, bone-deep fatigue. Not a flicker of warmth, not even a trace of real concern for me as a person. They were all so quick to assign me tasks, to scold me, to use me. But not one had asked if I was okay, if I'd eaten, or why I'd come home so late. This so-called family affection didn't even measure up to the kindness of a stranger on a city bus. Sometimes it's not anger that takes over. It's numbness. I finally spoke, my voice calm and even, but each word dropped like a stone. There's something I need to formally tell all of you. You're all grown adults. You've got your own lives, your own families. It's time to wean off. As of today, I'm no longer your unpaid maid. No more school pickups. No more dinner on the table. No more housework taken for granted. If you need it done, figure it out yourselves. And if any of you feel a sudden urge to care for some poor, fragile old friend, go ahead. I won't stop you. I won't interfere. But don't worry about me. I won't need anything from you either. The moment my words landed, the entire room fell into stunned silence. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances. Mom, what are you saying? Daniel was the first to speak, his voice tinged with disbelief. We're all working full-time jobs. Without you, we wouldn't even be able to pick the kids up from school. Anna chimed in immediately. Exactly. We don't get off work until 6 or later. How are we supposed to come home and cook dinner too? Are you just planning to let us go hungry? Leona scoffed, her tone laced with irritation. Clara, it's not like we actually think of you as a maid or anything. But James is always busy with his community activities. Someone's got to handle things at home. And honestly, you don't have a job. Helping out a little is no big deal, right? It's just something to keep you from getting bored. One by one they all stepped forward trying to convince me, reasoning with me like I was the one being unreasonable. But all I felt was a slow, searing fire rising in my chest. I'm not bored, I cut in coldly. And if you really think all of this is no big deal, then try doing it yourselves for a full day. Let's see how easy it feels then. I'm a human being, not your unpaid domestic help. I've spent decades running this house without a break. Now it's my turn to rest. Anna noticed the shift in my tone and quickly softened her voice, looping her arm around mine like a child trying to appease a parent. Mom, we're not saying you shouldn't rest. But it's not like you're working. Being at home is resting, right? Honestly, you're just upset because Vivian came over tonight, aren't you? She didn't do anything wrong. We were all here too. She's your old classmate and she wasn't feeling well. Dad was just helping her out. What's the harm in that? The more she spoke, the tighter my chest felt, the dull ache beneath my ribs flaring again. I gently pulled my arm away and looked her straight in the eyes. My voice was calm but sharp, every word heavy with purpose. First, being at home doesn't mean I've been resting. If you don't believe me, try taking turns with the housework starting tomorrow. Then tell me how rested you feel. Second, Vivian is your father's guest, not mine. I won't speak for what goes on between them. But don't use me to smooth things over just because you don't want to face the truth. Maybe it was the firm edge in my tone, something none of them had ever heard from me before. But suddenly the room went dead quiet. Even the air felt heavier. Then Vivian stepped forward, dabbing at the corners of her eyes with delicate fingers. Her voice trembled slightly, just enough to be noticed. I'm truly sorry, Clara. This was all my fault. I never meant to come between you and James. I've really overstayed my welcome tonight. I should go. Without waiting for anyone to respond, she hurried to the front door, gathering her things as she slipped on her shoes. It was clear she wanted to disappear as quickly as possible. The kids, flustered, trailed after her in a rush, muttering reassurances and apologies. Before the door even shut, a sharp slam echoed from the dining room. James had smacked his hand against the table so hard it rattled the plates. That's enough, Clara. His voice exploded across the room. You've been acting strange ever since this afternoon. Coming home late was bad enough, but now you're picking fights left and right. Let's be honest, is this really just about dinner? Or is it because I was caring for Vivian? Why do you keep dragging up the past? She had a fever, she was burning up to 101 degrees. And you still want to make a scene about it. His voice kept rising, sharp and impatient. For God's sake, a person's heart is supposed to grow broader with age. But your mind is shrinking by the year. When did you become so petty? And with that he grabbed his coat and phone and stormed out after the others, without even glancing back. Since they all say I've grown petty with age, fine. Let me be petty to the end. I went straight back to the bedroom and started packing. Not just for a night. Not just to get away from that bed. I was leaving this house for good. I didn't want to spend another day under this roof. Besides, the doctor had made it clear. I needed peace, not stress. But it hadn't even been half an hour since I walked through the door, and already my chest was tight, my breathing uneven. James hadn't been gone long before the kids came back in, assuming this was just another emotional flare-up. Their voices floated toward me from the hallway, trying to smooth things over. Mom, Dad was just walking Vivian home. It's late, she shouldn't be out alone. Yeah, come on, Mom. Sure, Vivian's elegant and well-kept, but if there was really something going on between her and Dad, it would have happened years ago, not now. Exactly. Dad's 67. What's he even gonna do at this point? Mom, we'll wash the kids up ourselves tonight. Just get some rest, okay? Tomorrow morning you can make breakfast and take them to school like usual. Their voices blurred together, a dull hum of rationalizing and delegating, every word only making the air around me feel heavier. I shut the bedroom door without a word. Packing didn't take long. There wasn't much I needed. A few changes of clothes, some jewelry, my documents, a charger. That was it. After decades in this house, it was almost laughable how little felt worth taking. The 2 rental properties my parents left me had always been under my name. The rent came to me. Add to that the money I'd quietly saved over the years, pinching pennies where I could. I had enough to live comfortably on my own terms. I used to plan on transferring the properties to the kids when I turned 80. Well, thank God I hadn't done it yet. Thank God I still had something to fall back on. As I rolled my suitcase out of the bedroom, Anna's family had already left. Daniel was in the bathroom bathing Zach. No one noticed me. I didn't care. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out and didn't look back. The night air hit me like a quiet relief, but I stood there for a moment, unsure of where to go next. They always said I was sheltered, that I hadn't seen the world. Maybe now was the time. And if this illness really couldn't be cured, then I sure as hell wasn't going to end my life in a kitchen or laundry room. The doctor said my radiation treatments wouldn't begin until next week. So I had a few free days. Why not use them? I didn't know how to book plane tickets online, so I did the simplest thing I could think of. I hailed a cab and told the driver to take me straight to the airport. Standing in the terminal, watching the destination board flicker through names, I picked a city I'd always wanted to see. I walked up to the counter and bought a ticket for the next available flight. Before boarding, I hesitated for a second and then sent a message to the family, just enough to keep them from calling the police. I'm going on a trip. Don't bother me. Then I powered off my phone. It was a red-eye flight, short, smooth, and when the wheels touched down, the sky was still dark. I'd landed in Portland. I'd seen it in travel videos before, called the City of Roses, a botanical paradise on the West Coast. I'd always wanted to visit. If I had any passion left in life, it was plants. My balcony was always packed with greenery, every inch filled with tiny bursts of life that reminded me there was still something to look forward to in my day. James never had time for travel. He always said Portland was too damp, that the air there feels sticky, hardly elegant. But I didn't need elegance. I just needed joy. When I turned my phone back on, a flood of messages poured in like a broken dam. They'd all seen my note. And now they were panicking. Mom, if you're gone, who's picking Zach up tomorrow? No one cooked dinner. Dad doesn't know how. What are we supposed to eat? Mom, don't be so stubborn. You wouldn't really go on vacation alone. You probably just booked a hotel nearby. Bet you'll be home by morning. Seriously, you don't even know how to use apps. You don't have family nearby. What if you get scammed? What if you end up lost on the street? The more I read, the more my brows furrowed. And then I saw it. The final message that made me laugh out loud, cold and bitter. From James. The older you get, the more childish you become. I'm curious to see if this house still functions without you. Since they couldn't stop buzzing in my ear, I decided to embrace the silence completely. I blocked every single one of them. Every number, every notification, set to do not disturb. Honestly, there wasn't a single word from any of them that I wanted to hear. But of course, it didn't take long for James's proud, "The house will manage just fine without you," to come back and slap him in the face. The very next morning, the moment I turned my phone back on, I was hit with a flood of unread messages. At 4 o'clock in the morning, James had been rushed to the hospital. As expected, it was his chronic stomach condition acting up, triggered by that spicy Mexican takeout and the alcohol he insisted on drinking last night. At first he tried to tough it out, convinced he could ride it through. But by the middle of the night, the pain had him doubled over. He searched the house top to bottom for the medication. Nothing. Eventually he woke Daniel up, asking him to help. Still no luck. Then came the frantic calls to me. Dozens of missed calls. Voicemails. Texts. But I'd slept like a rock after a full day of sightseeing, and I didn't hear a single one. The moment my phone powered on, Daniel's call came through almost instantly. "Mom. Finally you picked up." His voice was thick with exhaustion. "Dad had a terrible flare-up last night. His stomach pain got so bad we had to take him to the ER. I've been with him half the night and I still have to get to work this morning, plus drop Zach at school. I can't handle all this. Come on, Mom, don't be like this. Just come back and take care of him." I listened quietly, then calmly replied, "Didn't you understand what I said yesterday? I'm on vacation. Please don't disturb me." And I hung up. Then I went one step further. I blocked all their numbers. No more distractions. No more interruptions. I wasn't going to let anything ruin my trip. I hired a private VIP tour guide and spent the most carefree, liberating week I've had in decades exploring Portland. I visited every major attraction, tried all the food I'd been curious about, and finally made it to the botanical garden I'd always dreamed of seeing. The biggest surprise? I even had a full travel photo shoot. My personal guide was incredibly attentive. He didn't just show me around, he acted as my photographer and creative director, capturing every moment of my journey with care and precision. When I saw the photos afterward, I barely recognized myself. Bright eyes, glowing skin, radiant energy. There was a lightness in my expression I hadn't seen in years. So it turns out I could shine too. Just like Vivian. My guide even taught me how to use travel apps on my phone. Rideshare services, flight and hotel bookings, maps, travel reviews. I finally knew how to navigate the world without needing anyone's help. For years, whenever I asked my kids to teach me something simple, how to look up a recipe, how to use a new app, they always brushed me off, too impatient to bother. Not anymore. Now I didn't need anyone. I hadn't been left behind by the times after all. Day by day I felt lighter, freer. Even my body felt stronger, more energized. But when I finally came home after that beautiful week away and turned my phone back on, what greeted me wasn't peace. It was chaos as usual. A full-blown domestic circus waiting right at my doorstep. In the end, it all came down to this. Once the tireless, all-capable, never-complaining supermom disappeared from the household, everything began to fall apart. And only then, only when they finally started searching for help, did they realize just how deep the problem really was. Hiring a housekeeper to cook and clean didn't solve everything, because that housekeeper wouldn't look after the kids. A full-time nanny for the children didn't do housework. The daycare specialist who could care for Olivia wouldn't handle school pickups for Zach, now a first grader. So they needed a second nanny just for the afternoon shift. One helper wasn't enough. Not even close. And on top of all that, James was still stuck in the hospital, needing constant care himself. That's when they finally realized what I'd been all along. A full-service, on-call, multi-skilled domestic operator, who charged nothing, asked nothing, and even provided emotional support on demand. Suddenly the tune started to change. What had begun as finger-pointing and complaints turned into saccharine attempts to coax me home. Even Zach and Olivia were coached to take turns calling, their tiny voices chirping through voicemail. "Grandma, we miss you. Come back soon." Text after text followed, sugary sweet but desperate. "Mom, your protest has gone on long enough. Please come home. We really need you here." And at 3 a.m. a final message from Daniel, raw and unraveling. "Mom, I really can't do this anymore." When I landed, I didn't head straight home. I sat in the cab watching the familiar roads pass by, wondering how I'd feel returning. But some things needed closure. As we pulled into the neighborhood, I noticed a small stage had been set up on the plaza. Apparently the community was hosting an event. I glanced toward it idly until two familiar figures caught my eye. James and Vivian. He was in a tailored black suit. She wore a flowing crimson dress. The two of them danced a fiery tango under the lights. Their steps were sharp, fluid, impeccably in sync. Their eyes locked in subtle tension and unspoken electricity. Every turn, every lift, every glance between them felt like a whispered confession. A story told not in words but in motion. I stood there quietly watching. Oddly, I didn't feel anger. Just a faint, hollow ache rising in my chest. They had always been a pair, meant to be, in some way I could never compete with. I'd once fooled myself into thinking I'd found an opening in their story, slipping in while she was away, pretending it was fate. But in truth, things that don't belong to you, no matter how tightly you grip them, will always cost you something in the end. The music stopped. The crowd erupted in applause. James glanced into the audience, scanning the faces, then froze when he saw me. For a moment we both stood still. I looked down, said nothing, turned quietly and walked away, my suitcase wheels clicking softly behind me. I hadn't gone far when I heard footsteps, James catching up. He took the suitcase handle from my hand without a word and started walking ahead of me. Neither of us spoke as we made our way home. When we reached the door, he paused, then said quietly, Clara, I'm glad you came back. I hesitated, then slowly followed him inside. The house was tidier than I'd expected. Clearly someone had brought in a cleaning service. But my beloved houseplants told another story. Most of them had wilted from neglect, drooping sadly under the weight of a week's indifference. No one had cared enough to keep them alive. I sat down, ready to finally have the conversation that needed to be had. But just as I opened my mouth, the front door swung open. Vivian walked in, radiant and cheerful, her heels clicking lightly across the floor. She was glowing, lively, confident, smiling as if the world were hers to keep. "James, why didn't you wait for me?" Vivian's voice floated in gently as she walked through the door, a soft complaint laced with mild surprise. The moment she saw me, her expression faltered. Her eyes flicked to the suitcase beside me, and her hand instinctively tucked the house key she was holding behind her back. "Clara, you're back," she said with a forced smile, trying to mask her unease. "Why didn't you tell us ahead of time? We would have picked you up." She walked over and sat beside me with a polite smile, continuing her rehearsed explanation. "Oh, I meant to tell you earlier. James was just discharged a few days ago and the house has been a mess. Daniel and Anna were worried the temporary cleaners wouldn't do a proper job, and they were concerned about the kids and James being unattended, so they asked me to move in for a few days to help out. Don't worry, I've been staying in the guest room." I simply nodded, offering no reply. Vivian kept going, her tone casual, almost too casual. "Honestly, if James weren't so resistant to hiring a full-time housekeeper, none of this would have been necessary. These things can all be outsourced. You really don't have to run yourself ragged trying to do everything." That part I knew all too well. James had always been stubborn like that. Despite his income, he never allowed outsiders into our home. For all these years, we never once hired a live-in housekeeper. But I hadn't come back to rehash old habits or make small talk. My time was precious now, and I had no intention of wasting it. I turned to look at him, catching his gaze. His eyes were fixed on me too, a flicker of something unreadable behind them. I didn't bother easing into it. I went straight to the point. "James," I said calmly, "I want a divorce." His expression shifted instantly. Panic. Even a flicker of helplessness, an emotion I'd rarely ever seen cross his face. But it lasted only a moment before he composed himself again, slipping back into that cool, calculated composure he wore like armor. "Clara, that's not funny," he said, his voice low. "At your age, this kind of joke really isn't appropriate." "I'm not joking," I said firmly. "I've been thinking about this seriously, especially over the past week. For both of us, this might just be the most honest form of relief." His face darkened. "All this, just because of that dinner?" "You could say that," I replied, then paused. "But it's not just one dinner. It's every dinner that would have come after it. I'm done living my life in the kitchen. I have other things I want to do with the time I have left." His chest rose and fell with slow, controlled anger. Just then the front door burst open. "Grandma! Nana!" Zach and Olivia rushed in, squealing in delight as they ran toward me. I opened my arms instinctively, pulling them both into a tight hug. No matter what had happened, I had raised these children myself. No matter how much distance had grown, I still missed them. But the moment of warmth was short-lived. As soon as they noticed Vivian on the sofa, they slipped out of my arms and ran toward her instead. "Fairy Grandma." They circled around her, chattering excitedly, sharing stories from their day, laughing and giggling as they leaned into her lap. The scene stung, quietly but deeply. A few seconds later, Daniel and Anna walked in, and the moment they spotted me, they hurried over and wrapped me in a hug. "Mom, you're finally home. You look amazing. You must have had a great trip. We were falling apart without you. Thank God you're back. Honestly, that cleaning lady we hired wasn't working out anyway. We might as well let her go." "Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, Mom. Vivian really helped us these past few days, running back and forth between the hospital and the house. We couldn't have managed without her." Vivian gave a modest, slightly uncomfortable smile. But before anyone could say more, James suddenly slammed his glass down onto the table. The sharp sound echoed through the living room. "Enough." His voice was low, but it carried weight, tight, restrained, and simmering with frustration. "Do any of you even realize what you're doing? Your mother is not your maid." She just got home and you're already piling responsibilities back onto her. Can't you give her a moment to breathe? Starting today, all of you go back to your own homes. Housework, childcare, caring for the elderly, figure it out yourselves. Stop dumping everything on your mother the second something goes wrong. James's outburst had silenced Daniel and Anna completely. Even I paused for a moment, caught off guard. It was so unlike him. The man who had spent decades standing quietly on the sidelines while I handled everything, never once raising his voice on my behalf. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. "I'm sorry," I said calmly, "but I won't be handling household matters anymore. You'll need to figure things out yourselves from now on." Then I turned to James. "If there's nothing else, let's go to the lawyer's office at 9 tomorrow morning and sign the papers." His face went pale. You're really going through with this?" he asked, his voice low and tight. Daniel and Anna, still reeling from the earlier scolding, now looked even more stunned, staring at me in disbelief. "What?" Daniel blurted out. "Mom, you're getting a divorce? Why? This isn't because of Aunt Vivian, is it?" Anna added quickly. "She's just been helping out. We've seen everything clearly. There's nothing going on between her and Dad." "You're overthinking this." I shook my head. There was no point explaining anything to them. Let James tell them whatever he wants later. I looked at James again, voice steady. "I've thought about this thoroughly. I'm ending this marriage for good." "Mom, you're 65, Daniel said, sounding desperate. "You've been a housewife your whole life. How will you even manage after a divorce?" "Yeah," Anna chimed in. "Did someone out there fill your head with that live your own life stuff? Don't be naive, Mom. People just want your money." "Even if you meet someone new," Daniel added, "he won't be as dependable as Dad. They'll act sweet up front, but in the end you'll just be their caretaker again." Their words piled on, one after another, louder and more emotional. But all I felt was exhaustion. "I'm not asking for your opinions," I cut in sharply. "This divorce is between me and your father, not for either of you to meddle in. And for the record, I'm not helpless. I've devoted decades to this household. Legally, I'm entitled to half of everything. Plus, the 2 properties and inheritance from my parents. More than enough for me to live comfortably. I don't need your concern." That shut them up. They looked genuinely stunned, clearly unaware I'd planned all of this long ago. I turned back to James. "So, still hoping I'll change my mind? Still reluctant to go through with it?" The air in the room thickened. I knew exactly what James cared about most. Pride. Especially in front of others. Especially in front of Vivian. So I added, just loud enough, "If you don't want to look foolish in front of her, then do this cleanly. No drama. No delays." Sure enough, his jaw clenched. He nodded slowly, each word strained through his teeth. "Fine. If that's what you want, we'll do it. You'll get what's rightfully yours. I won't hold anything back." The weight that had pressed on my chest for years suddenly lifted. I nodded gently. "Good." With that, I stood and walked out. James said nothing, though his eyes were red. Daniel and Anna, however, erupted behind me, panicked, pleading voices cracking. "Mom, what are you doing? You're tearing this family apart. Are you out of your mind?" I didn't look back. I didn't answer. After leaving, I moved into a fully furnished apartment near the hospital. Quiet, simple, perfect. Kitchen, laundry, everything I needed. It was a place Grace helped me find. The same young woman who had once offered me a tissue on the bus. She'd grown up in a small rural town, worked her way through school and built a life in the city. Strong, self-made kind. We'd exchanged contact info after that night. When she heard about my situation, she took it upon herself to help. Finding me a place to stay, even connecting me with a professional caregiver to assist during my radiation therapy. Once I settled in, I took her out to dinner to thank her. It was warm, simple and real. The kind of conversation I hadn't had in years. That night, just as I was preparing for bed, the family group chat lit up again. Familiar names, familiar noise. Daniel. Anna. Her husband. All of them now taking turns trying to convince me to reconsider. "Mom, you're too old for a divorce. It's embarrassing. Think this through. Once you walk away, Dad's still a catch. Great pension, kind personality, he'll have women lining up. You'll regret it. You're making a mistake, Mom. A big one." I didn't reply to any of it. And then Daniel sent the message that cut the deepest. If you can walk away now when we need you most, then don't expect anything from us in the future. Don't expect me to call you mom anymore. I stared at that message for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I exited the group chat and blocked every number. Everyone except James. We still had paperwork to finalize after all. That night, I finally slept soundly for the first time in a long while. The next morning, I ordered a car at 8:30 and headed to the law office. Out of courtesy, I even sent James a reminder text, with the time and address. I arrived early. At 9:30 sharp, James appeared at the door. Only then did I finally breathe a sigh of relief. James showed up with stubble on his face and dark circles under his eyes. Exhausted, disheveled, a far cry from the refined man he always prided himself on being. I wasn't surprised. After a lifetime of standing above me, it must have been unbearable to suddenly find himself beneath me, outmaneuvered in every way. We signed the agreement quickly and headed straight to City Hall to finalize the divorce paperwork. When we handed in the forms, the clerk paused for a split second, visibly surprised. But professionalism kicked in quickly. She glanced between us and asked casually, "Reason for divorce?" James said nothing, his face a blank wall of indifference. I smiled lightly. If we must give one, let's call it irreconcilable differences. The clerk looked puzzled for a moment, probably wondering how two people who looked so polished could fall apart so neatly. But when she saw how clearly we'd divided everything, assets split 50-50, no disputes, she skipped any mediation and simply processed the paperwork. As soon as the formalities were over, I turned and walked away. James stood frozen behind me, his face even grayer than before. I didn't give his reaction another glance. While he was still stuck there in his daze, I was already in a cab moving forward. And just like that, life felt lighter, freer. The radiation treatments were rough, and there were days my body ached with fatigue. But overall it was manageable. And for the first time in decades I had space, real, uninterrupted space, to breathe. Grace came to the hospital nearly every day. Sometimes she helped me talk to the doctors, sometimes she just sat with me through lunch, chatting, offering encouragement with that quiet strength she carried. Other patients thought she was my daughter. They often whispered, "You're lucky to have such a thoughtful girl." Over time I got to know more about her. She grew up in a small, conservative town where everything favored her younger brother. She worked her way through college, paid her own tuition, and built a life with nothing handed to her. She'd been through more than most people ever knew. The more I learned, the more my heart ached for her. There was a quiet resilience in her, a kind of strength I admired deeply. And somewhere along the way I began to consider asking her to be my goddaughter. Strange, really. This was supposed to be the hardest stretch of my life, battling illness and starting over alone. But somehow, it had turned into the most peaceful chapter I'd known in years. Most mornings were spent at the hospital. The afternoons and evenings were mine, wide open, unhurried. But still the quiet could get heavy. The silence made room for fears to creep in. Every cancer patient, no matter how strong, has that fear. I was no different. The doctor advised me to find a distraction, to walk more, to get fresh air, to stay emotionally balanced. Grace remembered I once told her I used to paint in college. She kept gently encouraging me to try again, to pick up a brush, even just for fun. But I hadn't painted in decades. I didn't even remember where to start. The thought of holding a brush again felt foreign, distant. Until one evening, during a quiet walk, I passed a small, vintage-looking art studio tucked into a side street. It had that nostalgic charm, warm lights, soft music, and the unmistakable scent of linseed oil and canvas. I walked in casually at first. And there, seated at an easel, was an elderly woman painting in complete concentration. I was captivated. I stood quietly behind her, watching for nearly half an hour before she turned around. And we both froze. It was Diane, my college professor. The one who had once believed in me more than anyone else. She was over 80 now, her hair silver, her body frilier, but she still painted. And her reputation had only grown through the years. When she recognized me, her face lit up with warmth and disbelief. "Clara, you still have that look in your eyes. I'd know you anywhere." He poured me tea as we talked. I told her everything, about the years that had passed, about the life I'd lived. She listened quietly, then looked at me, her gaze steady. "I always knew you had real talent," she said. "You shouldn't have left it behind." I shook my head. "It's been decades. I've forgotten everything." She smiled gently. Then start again. From the beginning. Just for yourself. No pressure. Think of it as a hobby, just something that brings you joy. Something in me softened. For the first time in years I felt the weight lift. That night I picked up a brush. The first attempts were clumsy. My hands stiff, my lines shaky, the techniques long gone. I was almost embarrassed by how rusty I'd become. But I kept going. Day after day I practiced. Slowly, steadily I began to remember. I found my rhythm again. And with it, I rediscovered a piece of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Diane looked over a few of my practice pieces one afternoon. Her eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "I always said you weren't just a good student," she said softly. "There's emotion in your strokes. You tell stories with your colors. You have depth." She paused, then added, "To be honest, Clara, if you hadn't married so young, you'd probably be a professional artist by now." I looked down, smiling faintly. "I'm sorry, Professor. I really did waste the gift you saw in me." She patted my hand gently and replied with a warm smile. "But it's never too late, my dear. You still have time. You're just getting started." I blushed, nodding quietly. And this time, truly, deeply, believing her. Ever since I picked up the paintbrush again, my treatment days stopped feeling so heavy. Painting became my refuge. My distraction, my therapy, my rhythm. The hours passed easier, the fear receded, and even the pain seemed more bearable when my hands were busy blending color on canvas. Except for the occasional interruptions. James. After I'd blocked his number, he started calling from random numbers. Always some excuse, always some trivial reason. "Do you remember where I put my gray suit? Did you take that old photo book from the guest room? Which shirt should I wear to our cousin's wedding? And once, unbelievably, that flower you liked, it just bloomed. You want to come home and see it." Sometimes his voice came through thick with alcohol. "It's already dark out. Why aren't you home yet?" Every time I blocked the new number. Without hesitation. I didn't respond. I didn't want to. I didn't need those echoes from the past invading my space, pulling at my healing with strings I had already cut. Honestly, I didn't even understand what he was trying to do. He and Vivian. After all those years apart, they finally had no obstacles between them. Even the kids had come to accept her. Wasn't this his chance to reclaim the love story he'd lost? So why was he still clinging to me in these strange, awkward ways? Maybe old flames aren't always about passion. Sometimes they're just habits that die slow. I'd almost dismissed it all as his inability to let go, until the last day of my first round of radiation. Grace and I had just stepped out of the treatment wing. As we passed the courtyard, I spotted them, James and Vivian. She was sitting on a bench in the sun, and he was approaching her with a prescription bag and a folder of test results in hand. The sunlight cast a soft glow across her face. She raised her hand to shield her eyes, and James, with quiet ease, pulled a pair of sunglasses from his bag and gently placed them on her. She smiled at him. It was a soft, tender smile, easy and natural. And I stood there still. James wasn't incapable of thoughtfulness. He wasn't above the small, attentive gestures. He had just never done them for me. The way they moved together, the quiet ease between them. It looked like the ending of a love story, the kind that's meant to feel whole. I tugged gently at Grace's sleeve, ready to turn away. But James looked up just then, right into my eyes. His expression changed in an instant, and he strode toward me in quick steps. "Clara, are you following me?" His voice was sharp, accusatory. "Didn't you say you were over us?" He grabbed my arm, confronting me like I owed him an explanation. Vivian rushed up behind him, flustered. "Clara, please don't misunderstand. James was just helping me. He came with me to get a flu test. I've had a fever, I'm a bit weak." I smiled faintly. My voice was calm. "Don't worry. There's nothing to misunderstand. We've signed the papers. The divorce certificate might not have arrived yet, but as far as I'm concerned, he's a free man." As soon as the words left my mouth, Grace stepped forward. She was still in her hospital uniform, and her tone was firm and clipped as she brushed James's hand off my arm. "Sir, please keep your hands to yourself. This is a hospital." Then she turned to Vivian. "And you, if you're running a fever, put on a mask. Public space isn't your personal lounge." Vivian flushed, retreating a step in embarrassment. James, suddenly noticing the patient gown peeking out from beneath my coat, paled. "You're sick?" he asked, his voice uncertain now. "What do you think I'm doing here? Getting a facial? Grace snapped. What's wrong? Is it serious? Should I call someone? I can get you the best doctor. I cut him off, expression neutral. It's nothing major. I'm being discharged tomorrow. But thank you for your concern. I turned to leave. James looked like he wanted to follow, but Vivian stumbled behind him, nearly losing her balance, and he had no choice but to turn back and catch her. Grace watched him go, then looked at me and raised an eyebrow. That's your ex-husband? I nodded. She let out a short laugh. Let me guess. Back in the day you just fell for that face, didn't you? Her teasing was light, effortless, but it cracked something open inside me. I chuckled genuinely. Yeah, I said with a shrug. You're not wrong. And in that moment it hit me. The things that once consumed me, that once left me raw and restless, could now make me laugh. Just like that, the bitterness I'd carried for years began to dissolve. I was healing. Not just my body, but everything else too. The next day the official divorce certificate finally arrived in the mail. 40 years of marriage. Over, signed, sealed and done. Just like that the chapter closed. All that was left of the past was to forget it. With that weight finally off my chest, I did something I hadn't done in years. Posted on social media. Cheers to myself, for having the courage to choose freedom at this age. The news traveled quickly. Relatives and old friends started reaching out one by one, full of curiosity and concern. Most of them didn't even try to hide their shock. I couldn't be bothered with explanations, so I gave them the same vague answer over and over. We just weren't compatible anymore. But no one bought it. Come on, one cousin said with a scoff. You're telling me after 4 decades you just now realized you weren't compatible? Others were more direct. Some amused, some patronizing. You'll regret it soon enough, one neighbor said with a smirk. Just wait till James finds someone else. That's when it'll hit you. As soon as he remarries, another added, you'll realize what a mistake you made. It was almost laughable, like I'd been tossed aside, a discarded woman clinging to some fantasy of independence. As if my worth was solely defined by being someone's wife. But I looked at my life, really looked at it and weighed it carefully. 3 properties. More than enough savings. A gentle, bright young goddaughter who cared for me like family. A completed first round of cancer treatment with promising results. The doctor said that with regular checkups and proper care, it likely wouldn't shorten my life at all. By all accounts, my days had never been more peaceful or more mine. But I didn't bother explaining that to anyone. I'd learned the most important lesson of all. You don't owe your peace to anyone's understanding. So instead of wasting breath on gossip and judgments, I threw myself into painting. Grace, ever the cheerleader, kept urging me to share my progress with others. You should create an account, she insisted. Not just to connect with other painters, but to show other women it's never too late to start again. You could inspire so many people, women who feel stuck, invisible, forgotten. You could remind them they're not alone. Eventually I gave in. She helped me set up an account and named it Ink and Grace. A soft tribute to both art and the life we were building from scratch. I started posting quietly, photos of my progress, my sketches, my canvases. No talking heads, no self-promotion. Just the quiet intimacy of brush strokes, colors and layers forming on canvas. To my surprise, the account began to grow. Slowly at first, then steadily. More and more people followed. Some fellow artists, some strangers simply drawn to the quiet beauty of reinvention. The platform eventually reached out to collaborate, offering ad partnerships and promotion. I'd accidentally become a modestly popular art creator, and earned a little extra income on the side. But I never showed my face. Every photo, every video featured only my hands at work, or the soft silhouette of me painting in a pool of sunlight. Just a woman rebuilding a life in silence. A new beginning, without noise, without labels, without apologies. And just like that, the days passed, quietly, purposefully, peacefully. Grace's internship eventually came to an end. But due to her academic qualifications, the hospital couldn't offer her a permanent position, and her job search wasn't going well either. So I made a decision, one that surprised even her. I offered to fund her doctoral degree. Education is your passport, I told her. Another degree will open more doors than you can imagine. She cried while thanking me, insisting on writing out a promissory note, promising she'd pay me back one day when she could stand firmly on her own. Around that time, a few old friends started dropping by more often. They still seemed more interested in catching up on James than on me. "James seems quieter these days," one of them remarked. "He used to be so eloquent, now he barely talks at all." "I heard Vivian's moving into his house next month. No wedding, just a dinner with a few friends and relatives." "But never mind that," another added quickly. "You look healthier and more radiant every time we see you. Honestly, we're happy for you, darling." I just smiled. Their words didn't bother me. Not anymore. After all, James had finally married the woman he'd pined for his whole life. That was supposed to be his happily ever after. As for me, I'd long since removed myself from that story. What I didn't expect was what happened the day they were set to move in together. I had gone to the hospital for a routine checkup, nothing special. But when I walked into the consultation room, I froze. There they were, James, Daniel, Anna, Leona. Even Zach and Olivia. All crammed into the room. I stood still, speechless. James rushed toward me, grabbing my hand with both of his. "Clara, why didn't you tell me you had cancer?" His voice was trembling, nearly breaking. I hadn't seen him in months, and now he looked like a ghost of himself, gaunt, worn down, with panic and desperation carved into every line of his face. Daniel's eyes were red. "Mom, how could you keep this from us? This is cancer." Anna's voice cracked. "Mom, if Dad hadn't been cleaning the house and stumbled across your old medical report, we still wouldn't have known. How long were you planning to hide this?" Zach and Olivia ran over and threw their arms around me, hugging me tightly. I gently patted their backs and gave a faint smile. What could I say? When your heart's gone cold, you stop expecting warmth from people who've only ever left you in the cold. The doctor, clearly uncomfortable with the scene, finally spoke up. "She's in recovery. Emotional stability is essential to her healing. Please refrain from upsetting her." The room went quiet. After a long pause, Daniel mumbled, "If we'd known earlier, we would have hired help. We never meant for you to do everything on your own." Anna chimed in quickly, "Really, Mum, we didn't mean to hurt you. If we'd understood what you were going through, we wouldn't have let you handle everything by yourself. Not when you're sick." Just then Grace walked in, having just paid my medical bill. The moment she heard those words, her expression darkened. She walked straight over to me and gently held my arm. Her voice was low, firm, protective. "Clara, what did the doctor say about staying in good spirits? Don't let things like this weigh on you. Let's go home." I smiled at her and nodded. "All right." That one word sent a ripple through the room. Anna froze. "Mom, who is she?" Daniel looked equally startled. "Mom, why are you leaving with her?" James's face darkened, his eyes narrowing as they locked on mine. Leona, who had been uncharacteristically quiet until now, finally broke her silence, with all the tact of a hammer. "Clara, I really think you need to be careful. You know how people are these days. You've got 3 properties and plenty of money in your account. What if she's just here for your inheritance? That money was supposed to go to Daniel and Anna. Zach and Olivia are counting on it too. You can't just hand it over to an outsider." Before I could say a word, James raised his hand and smacked Daniel hard across the face. A sharp, echoing sound filled the room. His voice was low but cut like glass. "Tell your wife to shut her damn mouth. I don't hit women, so I hit you instead. Don't you ever repeat something so disgraceful again." Daniel looked stunned. He turned and glared at Leona, who shrank back and fell silent, face flushed with embarrassment. Her words had crossed a line, an ugly one. Even I felt the sting of them. And from the look on Grace's face, I could tell she'd been wounded too. Her cheeks were red, her eyes flashing. My heart burned with fury. "Grace is my goddaughter," I said coldly. "Does anyone here have a problem with that? You already accepted another woman as your new mother. Why can't I choose whose family to me? I know exactly what kind of person Grace is. If any of you had shown me even half the care and warmth she has, I wouldn't be standing here today feeling like a stranger in my own life. And even if she were after my money, so what? It would still be worth it. I'd rather give it all to her than to people who only see me as a burden." Without waiting for a response, I turned, took Grace's hand and walked out of the room. No one followed. But just before I stepped out, I caught a glimpse of Daniel and Anna's faces. They weren't angry anymore. Not even indignant. They just looked shaken, ashamed, startled, and maybe, just maybe, a little afraid. Days passed, quiet and steady, just as I liked them. I thought they had finally backed off. After all, I wasn't going to the hospital as frequently and none of them knew where I lived. Or so I thought. But the very next day, James showed up at my door. When I opened it, I froze for a second. He looked worse than he had the day before. Hollowed cheeks, even darker circles under his eyes, his voice hoarse and rough. I was wondering if I could come in for a bit, he said quietly. I just wanted to see how you're doing. I hesitated. Then without a word I stepped aside and let him in. But I didn't offer him a drink, didn't say a word of welcome. He wasn't a guest. I hadn't invited him. He didn't seem to mind. He slowly wandered through the apartment, eyes scanning the canvases on the walls. Paintings in warm tones, vivid strokes, layers of color. My work, my rediscovered self. Clara, you really started painting again? His voice was soft, almost in awe. Your work feels stronger than it used to. And you, he paused, looking at me, you look more alive, like the woman you were when you were young. When I was young. Something in those words hit a tender spot. Back then I'd wondered so often, did he ever really see me? He kept walking, taking in every detail. This place, he said slowly, it's warmer than I expected. Feels like a real home. Our old house just feels like an empty shell now. I didn't respond. I just went back to my easel, picking up my brush again. But he stood there like something inside him had finally burst open. I'm not with Vivian anymore, he said. Truth is, I never really planned to get back together with her. His voice was strangely calm now, as if he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. After all these years I realized it wasn't her I missed. It was who I used to be when I was with her. That old dream of youth, not the person herself. She wanted something more and I thought maybe I could give her that. Maybe it was better than sitting alone in a house full of memories. But when I found your medical report, everything snapped into focus. His eyes met mine. That day I realized, I never cared for you enough. I never truly saw you. I guess I've cared more than I ever admitted, even to myself. My brush faltered in my hand. I stared at the canvas, suddenly unsure where the next stroke should fall. He stepped closer. I'm sorry, Clara, he said. I never wanted the divorce. Not really. I wasted so many years. Can I have a chance to make it right? My instinct took over. I shook my head. And just then a single tear dripped onto the canvas, dissolving a stroke of color into a soft blur. Like an old scar resurfacing, quiet but undeniable. I think that's enough for today, I said softly. I have things to do. Please leave. I stood up and walked him to the door. The moment it shut behind him, the tears came harder, falling one after another. Not for him. For me. For the woman who had spent a lifetime trying to warm a heart that never held her close. Now that it finally did, I no longer needed it. That chapter was over. The rest of my life, whatever was left, was mine now. After that, James seemed to appear everywhere. At my studio door, quietly watching me paint. In the hospital waiting room during my follow-ups. Sometimes even outside my building, holding grocery bags, offering fruits and vegetables I never asked for. Eventually, the kids started tagging along, showing up like awkward guests with practiced concern. I stopped letting any of them in. To avoid their visits, I started traveling with fellow artists. Plein-air painting trips, weekend workshops in the countryside, quiet retreats that filled me with peace. Then months later, something unexpected happened. I received a bank notification. James had wired me $200,000. Along with it, a short message. I sold the old house. Thought you might need it, for your treatment. James. I stared at the screen, stunned. The truth was, I didn't need the money at all. I had solid medical insurance. My rental properties brought in steady income. My art account had grown rapidly, and ad partnerships now brought in more than James's monthly pension. I thought about returning the money, but the process was complicated and I kept putting it off. I hadn't even responded, yet somehow chaos had already erupted on his end. Word got out. The kids were furious. They fought with him over that money. Daniel accused him of giving away their inheritance. Leona ranted that some woman who's not even family would benefit from their future. They didn't see it as compassion. They saw it as betrayal. And just like that, the family who once couldn't spare a thought for me now argued bitterly over my worth. After I'd already walked away. I let out a quiet sigh and returned the money the very next day. But it didn't take long before James showed up at my door again. "Clara," he said, eyes filled with hopeful desperation, "you returned the money. That means I still have a place in your heart, doesn't it? The kids say they miss you too. Please, come home. I'll take care of myself this time. I'll help with the grandkids. I really want to start over. Can we try again?" I gently but firmly refused him. But he didn't give up. Like a stubborn old student clinging to one last lesson, he kept appearing, every few days, sometimes even bringing friends or acquaintances to plead on his behalf. I was exhausted by it. So I quietly moved again, this time without telling a soul. Then I threw myself deeper into my travels and my painting, letting the rhythm of the road and the flow of color carry me far away from everything I'd once tried so hard to hold together. With my artist friends, we'd disappear for 10, sometimes 15 days at a time, exploring coastlines, forests, mountains. I painted sunsets in Arizona, rivers in Oregon, autumn leaves in Vermont, and cliffs along the Pacific Highway. And for the first time in my life I felt that poem come alive in me. Only then did I realize how wide the world truly is. My collection grew. So did my circle. And thankfully the cancer never returned. In fact, I was healthier than I'd been in decades. On my 67th birthday, I held my very first solo landscape exhibition. It was a clear, sunlit day. My old professor attended in person, standing proudly on stage to make a special announcement. I would be her final student. That moment drew attention from the local press, a few art critics, and even some national media. My story, the former housewife who rediscovered herself through art, suddenly became a headline. On the last day of the exhibition, while chatting with a few gallery guests, I noticed a familiar figure standing quietly in the corner. James. Thinner than before, face lined with exhaustion, he stood motionless in front of one of my paintings, Mountain Falls. I walked over slowly. When he noticed me, he looked startled, unsure of himself. "This one? Is that the waterfall?" he asked softly. "You always said you wanted to take me there someday," he added almost to himself. "But I always said it was too much trouble. You went anyway, without me." I nodded. I'd heard his health wasn't great lately. Something early stage, still treatable, but serious enough that he rarely left home anymore except for doctor visits. Just then I heard familiar voices behind me. "Mom." I turned. "Daniel. Zach. Olivia." Their faces were a mix of surprise and disbelief, clearly not expecting to see me, let alone in an art gallery hosting a successful show. From their stunned expressions I could tell, James had never told them I'd started painting again. They certainly had no idea that the growingly popular art account Ink and Grace, the one getting attention from art circles and social media alike, was me. "Mom, you look younger than you did 2 years ago," Anna said, stepping in beside them, equally wide-eyed. "You've been painting this whole time? Why didn't you ever tell us?" Daniel asked. "Grandma, this is incredible. You're better than the artists we learn about in school," Zach said excitedly. "Nana, I think I want to be like you when I grow up," Olivia added, beaming up at me. I just smiled gently without saying much. Daniel and Leona looked tired, worn down. I'd heard they'd divorced last year. And from the way they watched me now, I could see the questions hanging in their eyes. Things they wanted to say, stories they maybe wanted to rewrite. But I wasn't about to give them that chance. I had other guests to welcome. Grace was already approaching with a group of her classmates, smiling brightly, waving from across the gallery. As I began to walk away, Dame stepped closer again and said in a low voice, "I used to hold on to the hope that maybe you'd come back one day. But I get it now. You've walked too far forward. There's no going back anymore." I laughed, full and free. "You're right," I said. "Because this is the life that finally belongs to me. The tides of life come and go. Maybe we'll cross paths again someday. But when we do, we'll just be old acquaintances. Nothing more."